Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us tonight for Understanding Post-Secondary Options. My name is Kim McGee-Wiley, and I'm one of the post-secondary counselors at Deerfield High School. And I'm joined by my colleague across the way, Jen Pendergast, who is one of the post-secondary counselors at Highland Park High School. And we're happy you're here. We have a great evening for you. It looks like the snow is just starting to come down a little bit. So the joke is that every year we have this program, it is snowing. So thank goodness that we are doing this on a webinar so you can enjoy this from the comfort of your own home tonight. So you're in for a treat tonight. We have four wonderful speakers, and we're lucky to have them here. So we're going to start off the evening hearing from Jim Pearson, who is the Senior Admissions Officer for North and South America at University College Dublin in Ireland, and he will speak about attending colleges internationally. And next we'll hear from Veronica Howad, who is the Director of Admissions and the Director for Access, Affordability, and Inclusion at the University of Chicago. And she will speak about the liberal arts college experience. And then we have Nick Sanders, who is the Associate Director of Admissions at Parkland College, who will speak about attending community college. And last but not least, we have Brian Hodges, who is the Senior Associate Director of Recruitment and Outreach for the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, who will speak about large public universities. Tonight, you have the opportunity to hear from four unique colleges and universities who maybe you would have never ever considered this option. So we really want you to keep your ears open and consider something that you might not know anything about, okay? Jen's going to be monitoring questions that come in. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in the Q&A. And at the end, we will leave time to answer those questions. We have about 15 minutes at the end to address that. And just so everyone knows, this presentation is being recorded so you can access it later as well. So without further ado, let's start with Jim from University College Dublin.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. I'm excited for what is my 7th event here for Understanding College Options. And it's always been a great time, a bit different this year, but still happy we get to share all these great opportunities with everyone watching tonight. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about opportunities abroad and doing a degree outside of the United States. I work for University College Dublin, which is an Irish public university. I apologize, I don't have an Irish accent. So I'm American. I grew up in Illinois. I went to University of Illinois, ILL, INI, just like everyone's saying. So it's a great experience growing up in the States and going to school in the States and being near home and having that great opportunity and all the great opportunities all around the country. But growing up, I was from a small town. I had no idea you could go to another country to do a degree. And I never considered it because no one came to my high school to tell me about it. So I'm happy to be able to have this job, to be able to talk to students and families about what's out there and what's available to you. And most students I talk to are like me. They have no idea that this is even something you can do. So I'm glad that I get the opportunity to share this kind of opportunity with everyone. And I am supposed to talk about international options for university. But there's a big asterisk on everything because there's 190 some sovereign countries in the world, and they all have different education systems. They all operate a little bit differently, and there's tons of options out there, obviously. So there's a lot to consider and a lot to go over, and I'll give you some of the kind of general concepts, things you should think about, things to start asking questions about. But you're going to have to look into each country and each university and each province kind of separately because they all have a little bit of a different experience, just like the experience is different in Illinois versus California versus New York. So there's a lot to consider there. So the first thing that I get asked a lot, or like that, counselors are asked, like, is there a student that's the right fit for this kind of university I can recommend to? And it really is. I mean, as you might imagine, it's good for students that are a bit more independent, that can operate a little bit more on their own, that don't need as much of the supports and, being close to home and family that you might get going to a US university. But it's also good for anyone that's looking to find out what they're capable of and what they're able to do when they don't have that safety net and that support system around them. So it can be hard, but it can be an enriching experience for all students, regardless of what they might be like in high school or what you might be like now if you're a student watching today. So there is a lot out there, and it really is something that can show you how resilient you can be and how much you can grow in a new environment. And then some of the questions about how do you decide, how do you narrow down this whole literal world of opportunities out there? The hard part is that you have the same considerations that you have for going to school in the United States. So you have to think about where you want to go to school. Do you want to go and live in a city, or do you want to live in a small town or somewhere kind of in between? Do Do you want to go to a big school or a small school? Do you want something that's more focused on liberal arts or performing arts, or do you want something that's large and comprehensive? So there's a lot of those same considerations that you have, but then multiplied by all the countries you might consider going to. And then there's another layer of questions to consider. So what kind of environment do you want? Do you want to go to a school in an English speaking country where it might be a little bit easier to adapt and integrate into the community? Do you want to go and study in an English taught program in a country that doesn't speak English as their primary language? Or do you want to learn in another language? Are you fluent in now, or do you want to become fluent in something else? Do you want to dive into that? So there's a lot to consider there. So you have to think about your language capabilities, your desire to learn another language, and then what you might feel comfortable with for 3 or 4 years. And then there's a lot of different kinds of institutions. Typically, you might look at public institutions looking abroad, but there's also US universities that offer international education opportunities, like New York University's pretty well known for their campuses in the Middle East and in China. So there's a lot of opportunities to do an American degree from an American university, but in another country. Or you can do those kind of fully public international universities like University College Dublin is. And then there's a whole category of opportunities like American universities abroad. So that's like the American University of Paris or the American University of Rome. And these are typically smaller and typically kind of liberal arts focused universities or colleges that are entirely abroad. They're accredited in the United States. They offer an American style education, but you get to do it all in Paris, which is a pretty nice opportunity if you think about it. So I'll start off with what we're focused on and what we should be kind of considering is the academic component and what you're going to do and what it can get you. Usually the most common question I'm asked is this a real degree? Is this something that I can use when I graduate, when I go back home? And yes, if you go to a public university abroad, if you go to a accredited university, and we can, if you have questions, I can help you figure out what that means internationally. It will be an undergraduate bachelor's degree that you can use in the States for most things. There's things to consider, like there's a lot of undergraduate professional programs that you can do, like medicine, veterinary medicine, dentistry, law, physiotherapy. Those are usually degrees that are taught at an undergraduate level. Like at UCD, you can do a 6-year medicine degree right out of high school and graduate and move back to the States and start practicing as a doctor. It gets a little bit more complicated because every professional program has their own accreditation and opportunities or hurdles to jump through to become accredited and to be able to practice that wherever you want to live. Like there's a bar association for every state and territory in the United States, and they all have different rules about what a foreign law degree will do and what you need to do to be able to practice law back in the States. But those are opportunities, and outside of those kind of niche or like more specialized professional programs, there's everything available. So there's animal science or zoology or English literature or history, and there's a lot of those things that you can study and get kind of a different perspective. So studying history at a European university can give you a pretty different perspective on history and gets you more opportunities to actually get out and see history in person and in a more alive way than if you studied it in the States. You see it by walking out on the World War II battlefields instead of seeing a slideshow in a lecture hall. So those kind of academic changes are a bit different. The one thing that you should be aware of is that typically it's a little different in Canada and some of the American schools, but most international universities focus on direct entry, where you say what major you want to study, you go into that major, you never take anything else. There's no gen ed requirements. So if you go into English literature, you never take another math or science class again. If you go into biology, you never take another history class again. So it is very focused, which also means that it's a bit more difficult to change your mind. So I knew a student when I worked at a university in the States that changed her major 8 times in 4 years. And she could do that because of the way her program was set up, but that's not possible usually when you're going abroad. So you do have to know what you want and be focused on that. And then when you get there, you get to focus in on that subject and do that thing that you're really passionate about and not have to take a bunch of things you're not as interested in. When you think about applying to universities, once you figure out what you want to do and where you want to go, how you get there, there's a lot of different ways. Most universities will have a direct application where you'll apply specifically to that university, but there's a large and growing number of universities that are on the Common App, so it can be just as easy as applying to a US university for applying to an international university, or some countries, like if you're thinking about going to the UK, they have a country-specific app, UCAS, UCAS, and that's where you apply to multiple universities at the same time through one application. It's like the UK equivalent to the Common App. So it varies a little bit country to country and even province to province. Like it's different in Canada if you're applying to Ontario schools versus BC schools. So it can vary a lot there, but generally you want to find the universities you're interested in and then ask them what the best way is to apply. So people like me working at universities across the world are happy to help you figure out how to get to their university. Some big differences in a lot of ways and applies to most universities. Like I said, students will apply to a specific program, and then academics are the most important aspect of an application. So in Ireland, typically programs don't read essays at all. We don't look at your extracurriculars. I'm sure you're all great cellists or scouts or have great part-time jobs or whatever it might be, but that's not what we're focused on for admissions. We're looking at your academic capabilities and what that can show as for you being a success in the course that you're going to study. Obviously, that's a bit challenging now because everything has changed in our lives in the last year. So it's harder to take standardized testing, and students don't have the same kind of test scores and educational background that they might have had in previous years. So schools are being a lot more flexible in that. But generally, you're going to be looking for schools that are going to be looking a lot more at your transcripts and test scores and not at your resume or your essays. And then I can't really tell you when to apply. Usually the earlier the better, but deadlines vary a lot across the globe, especially if you're thinking going down under. The seasons are reversed. Everything's a bit different in Australia and New Zealand. So if you're thinking about going there, you have to start a lot earlier or wait a little bit longer to start school. So a lot of that is where you'll really need to be kind of a go-getter and figure out what you want and ask the questions to get to where you want to go. And then another very common question I get is that, students or families are thinking that this has to be incredibly expensive, and it really isn't, or it doesn't have to be. It varies a lot, just like in the United States. So you can go to universities that are fully funded, where like the University of Hamburg or most German universities, a lot of universities across Europe don't have fees for students or tuition costs for students. They might have a student registration fee of like 300 euro, and then you just have to pay for your living costs for a year. Those universities can also be very hard to get into, or if you want to go to Germany, you usually need to know German, which helps. But then you can go to public universities across the country or across the world that will be equivalent in price to a lot of universities that you might be looking at in the US, especially if you're looking out of state or at some private schools, and all that varies depending on their financial aid packages and scholarships. But you can find a lot of competitive options for you when you're looking at universities abroad. And most of these universities that you'll look for that are attracting US students will also offer some kind of scholarship and financial aid, which leads us to these kind of cost considerations. So most universities you'll look at will be eligible for federal student loans, and that will also include GI Bill or post 9/11 Bill, 529 plans. The thing that doesn't transfer abroad is Pell Grants. Those can only be used in the United States per Department of Education rules, but all the other federal student loans that you might use for university, you can bring outside to most schools. There is a link at the bottom there, or you can just Google FAFSA international universities, and it has an Excel sheet of every university that accepts federal student loans outside the country. So it makes it an easy way to narrow down your list of what you might be looking for. And then most schools, like I said, will offer some kind of scholarships. Most of that will be merit-based, so they'll be looking at your test scores or your GPA or your other academic background. And then there are a couple other considerations to think about. So one benefit of going abroad is that a lot of programs are 3 years versus 4 years. So you can do your whole bachelor's degree in the United Kingdom or in Ireland or in a lot of other places in just 3 years, which can save you a year of tuition and fees. And then you also have to think about the exchange rate fluctuations. So changing financial markets can change a lot. So you got to keep an eye on how strong the euro is against the dollar or wherever you're going to kind of get the right kind of exchange rate or kind of be more beneficial. And then you have to think about, just like in the US, cost of living. It's very expensive to live in London, just like it's expensive to live in New York, but it can be cheaper to live outside of the bigger cities or in some of the smaller areas or smaller countries. And then for anyone out there that has citizenship for another country, it varies a lot by country, whether they'll accept that just citizenship and not residency to qualify for in-country tuition and fees. So Canada and Australia tend to be a bit more flexible with that. The UK and Ireland tend to be not flexible. So you usually have to have some kind of residency history to qualify for tuition and fees like an in-country student. So that's something you're really gonna want to communicate and figure out early. So in sophomore or junior year, you can start figuring that out and then know what you're getting yourself into by the time you start applying. And then it's all a bit different for those professional programs like med and vet med. So that's another thing to keep an eye on for cost. And then another question for a lot of students is what this means, what you get out of it at the end, or even during your studies, to get those same opportunities to get ready for your career and be able to progress and do what you want. Almost every country you'll look at will have options for students to study and work at the same time. So usually part-time, 20 hours a week is kind of typical across a lot of countries for what you can work while you're a student. The minimum wage is a lot higher in a lot of other countries, so that you can, pay for a lot of your trips to Rome or a lot of your spending money out of your part-time job. And then a lot of schools will also offer internships, co-op programs, and career resources for students that will let them work after graduation, be prepared for that, and have the network they need to succeed. And then there's also a lot of countries, if you are thinking, or maybe you're not thinking, but it happens that you want to live abroad more long-term afterwards, like you meet the love of your life in university, like a lot of us do. There's options to work in your country where you go to school after graduation and then be able to stay long-term and look at those options for being an American expat for a longer time than just your degree program. And then the campus life, there's a lot there for you. There's the same kind of clubs and activities that you can get involved with at most universities. If you go to a big school, you'll be able to find a club or society that kind of fits your idea, your personality. So you can join board game society, or you can join the rugby team. The biggest differences are that the sports are very different outside of North America. So you don't usually get those big scholarships for playing sports. They don't do a lot of recruiting. And there's no fraternities or sororities outside of North America. So the Greek life you get going abroad is Greek students. You can go to Greece. That can be your Greek life. But other than that, you probably wouldn't get that kind of fraternity sororities, but you can get a lot of social enjoyment and social exposure through the clubs, societies, student employment, and then travel, because you can get a 50-euro plane ticket from Dublin to Paris or to Barcelona and be able to experience Europe and do that all on the weekend. So if you want to take weekend shopping trips to Paris, it's not a bad deal as a student. And then there's a lot of ways to get involved. It's typically harder to do some of the American sports. There is American football abroad, but you'll see fewer American football teams or softball or baseball teams, but you'll see more like Olympic handball or going skiing in the Alps or surfing in Australia. So there's a lot of great opportunities for you going abroad. And then the travel really is, everything's so close in Europe, it makes it a great place to be able to experience the world. And this is a lot. I've talked pretty fast and gone through a lot of information, and I'm here to answer any questions. I'm sure if you want to connect about other countries or other universities, I'm happy to do that. But then there are other resources, organizations I'm a part of, like the Association of International Regional Representatives, is other North American based reps for international schools like me. So you can go to airna.org and learn some more about some other universities. So thank you very much for listening to this. I'll let us all move on to some of the other universities and really get exposed to a lot of other great options. But I'm grateful I had the chance to talk with you all here, and looking forward to chatting some more at the end.
All right, thanks, Jim. That was great. And next, we're going to hear from Veronica from the University of Chicago, and she's going to talk about the liberal arts college experience.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm going to pull up my slides. All right, success. Hopefully you can see all of these. So my name is Veronica. I work in the undergraduate admissions office at the University of Chicago. I'm a Chicago native, but I lived for quite some time in Ohio. I went to Kenyon, which is another liberal arts college. It's a small residential liberal arts college in the center of the state. Both Kenyon and UChicago, while definitely sharing curriculum in mind, liberal arts in mind, very different in size and setting. So liberal arts colleges come in all types. And that's what I'm going to be chatting about today, what a liberal arts college education is all about. We're going to go over some myths quickly, maybe misconceptions of what liberal arts really is. We're going to go over the history. We're going to nerd out just a little, go over the history of liberal arts, and talk about today what that means for liberal arts curriculum, because that's what we're talking about. When we say liberal arts, we're talking about a curriculum distinction. So how do students study? What kinds of classes, what kinds of majors, what kinds of gen ed requirements do they have at the college that they're attending? So let's start off with just some myths and misconceptions. It's totally fair. The average person still in the US, if they go to college, they don't go to a liberal arts college. They may start out at the liberal arts and sciences undergraduate college at a big university and then switch into a different college there once they find their major. But it's pretty rare still for students to study this way. So it's not unusual for there to be questions about what kind of education this is. Families who are unfamiliar with liberal arts hear those two words, liberal and arts, and make some assumptions about whether or not this education is tied to politics. It's not, has nothing to do with liberal versus conservative. or that maybe these kinds of schools cater to students who study in the fine arts. These schools have great fine art departments, but it's not the only thing that they're offering. So let's go over some myths quickly. We'll start with this.
And consider this, without you to make the case for the physics department, the task will fall to people like Leonard and Rajesh.
Are you trying to scare me? Because you're succeeding.
Well, then prepare to be terrifying. If your friends are unconvincing, this year's donations might go to, say, the geology department.
Oh dear, not the dirt people.
Or worse, it could go to the liberal arts.
No.
Millions of dollars being showered on poets, literary theorists, and students of gender studies.
Of humanities.
Boo, Sheldon. Sheldon's supposed to be smart and he doesn't know what liberal arts is. This is so disappointing. Okay, so there are a lot of misconceptions out there about what liberal arts is and is not. So let's set the record straight of what it is. Liberal arts historically it's a curriculum distinction. So if a college is telling you that they are a standalone liberal arts college, or that they are a liberal arts and sciences option at a big university, they're all kind of saying the same thing. Their focus is on a well-rounded education. Most colleges today in the US still have some semblance of gen ed requirement. No matter what degree you're coming into, some portion of your classes will still be dedicated to trying other subjects, even if you know what you want to do, even if you're coming into a program already built out. So that's not unusual anymore. But this idea of like centering your higher education around a wide variety of subjects, it's a pretty old idea. So I've got up on the slide the 7 original liberal arts. So there were 3, they added 4. It became the kind of classical education for liberal arts. We're talking classical, like young men studying debate and stars and math in togas. So old kind of education. It was education for freedom and for growth. So the freedom part is kind of twofold if you're really looking at the history of liberal arts. Part of that has privilege rolled up in it. So freedom actually meant who was free to learn, right? Because throughout history, you've had people who were free from the other duties of life, whether it was work or some other kind of commitment to learn. Or we have also people historically who have been excluded from opportunities to experience higher education, whether that was because of race or sex and gender or religion, whatever it was. So there's this hint of like privilege of, well, who is free to spend their time just learning? And in this particular way, not learning toward one profession, but just learning for the sake of learning, right? Learning different subjects. That was a really novel idea. The idea of this kind of education came up along with the idea of democracy. So this idea that, you are free to learn, we have this new kind of society, and in this new kind of community, it may be beneficial to people to learn a lot of things. The more you know, the more people you can connect with, and the more people you can lead, right? So it's really about who is free to learn, quite literally, who is free to have this kind of education, who has the freedom to spend their time learning not just about a profession, but more generally. And how could you kind of grow not your knowledge only, but also work with others, this community-based idea. So ancient idea was to have it, what was expanded to 7 areas of learning, that you're going to try all these different things and learn. So that piece still plays out today. We'll see in a moment how that plays out in today's curriculum at liberal arts colleges. The idea that you don't come into college already knowing what you want to do, already with major or specific program in mind, still unusual, but liberal arts colleges base a lot of what they do in skill building. So most liberal arts colleges will not require you to pick a major or program when you come in. You apply generally to the college. And once you get to that college, you will then get to sample classes, meet with advisors, right? Figure things out and pick a major and program then. While you are sampling classes and subjects and talking to professionals on campus, you will be building skills. And the hope on the end of the liberal arts college is that you will be building important skills that you can transfer and apply to many different subjects and therefore many different careers. I think we've heard in other presentations people will often say, jobs that exist today didn't even exist a few years ago. Like, that's true. We have to be nimble. And being nimble means building out skills that can be applied to different areas. Sometimes there is concern because of a lack of knowledge of liberal arts as to what happens after you graduate from a liberal arts college, right? So a school that you go to where you don't really know what you're going to study yet, you have a really wide set of requirements, you're going to learn a wide set of things. Eventually you will pick a major, a specialty area. But how can this kind of education, what doesn't seem to be like profession or job oriented, how can that possibly help a student in the future? Of the 2 liberal arts colleges I've looked at, and certainly all of the other ones that my colleagues have worked at, we have not seen any issue with students being able to translate skills into really cool jobs and opportunities after graduation. That idea that you should be building skills that are applicable to different fields and learning how to apply them to different fields is something that we've seen a lot of different industries love, right? Grad schools love it. Many of our students will need to continue their education after college if what they want to do requires another degree. Or certainly with the people who are hiring our students as interns, as full-time employees after graduation, that nimble mind, that ability to build skills across different disciplines, to think in an interdisciplinary way, right? To see a problem and to try and solve it or make use of it, understand it with lots of different disciplines applies to lots of different jobs. While there are certainly professional benefits to building skills, there are also lots of really cool personal benefits. So this ancient idea that knowing a lot connects you to a lot of people is still at the heart of what so many liberal arts colleges care about. So it's, you build cool professional skills, but on a personal level, you learn how to understand so many different kinds of people. I have a really cool article that I read about the liberal arts, which I will share with Kim and Jennifer and others. They can send it out to families if they want to read more. We like reading more at liberal arts colleges, so I'll send that around. But these are the 10 points. The article lists out 10 points why it's good to know how to do different things and how in the end, it's really about connecting you with other people. So I said I went to Kenyon, a liberal arts college out in Ohio. I love Kenyon's president. He's an amazing, intelligent, nerdy man. And he, by trade, was a chemistry professor before he rose through the ranks of, college leadership. I have not taken chemistry since high school, but I know a little bit about chemistry. And when he gets all fired up and lit up about bioluminescence, I can understand a little bit of what he is saying, and we can connect on something that he loves, right? I don't know tons about sports, but I've been following football lately with different people in my family, my friends. It's not the thing I love, but they love it, and I understand a little bit of it. So we can have that conversation. That's the whole point, right? That what you know is not just good for you. It's nice being smart. It's nice knowing things, but the only benefit really is in how it allows you to connect with others. And as we saw in ancient times, allows you to be appealing to more people and lead more people. So there were benefits there on a personal level. So ancient liberal arts was 7 areas of study. Today, there are a whole bunch of different ways that liberal arts colleges envision curriculum, but it's kind of a sliding scale. So if we think about it with the norm being in the middle, think of Gen Ed, right? Think of what is today distribution or diversification. That is when a liberal arts college will tell their students, hey, in order to graduate, regardless of what you eventually pick as your major, your main area of study, we want you to take between 3 to 5 different classes, different subject areas. That's very common for a liberal arts college. They have a basic gen ed requirement. They want you to sample different subjects. They'll give you a small list, 3 to 5 areas. If you do that and you fulfill your program area requirements for your major, then you are on track to graduate, right? That's what they're trying to do. There are some colleges in the nation that are liberal arts colleges, but they have an open curriculum. So open curriculum means there's no gen ed, there's no distribution. So those colleges are in fact liberal arts colleges. They have different departments, different professors doing cool things. You can learn anything you want there, and they trust that a student coming to that college says they are interested in a wide breadth of classes, right? Liberal arts, but they don't have any gen ed requirements. They will sometimes have a first year seminar that is likely to build reading, writing, and research skills. And they still usually have requirements for a major. So whatever thing you're going to pick, you will have class requirements in that area. They don't have any kind of gen ed distribution. On the far end, right, you've got no curriculum, a gen ed distribution curriculum. On the far end, you have schools with a core curriculum. So this is where UChicago's college exists. A core curriculum means they have a souped up gen ed, right? So we have 8 areas of study at UChicago that all students have to try classes in. It's our core. And it varies from math and 2 different kinds of sciences to proving that you have intro-level foreign language abilities, to sampling, either producing or appreciating the fine arts, and then a whole different set of reading and writing based courses. 8 is a lot. It's a lot more than usual. So for schools that say they have a core, you have to know going into that means they have extra distribution requirements. Now this does kind of color the search process, because you might say as a student that, like, yes, I see the benefit of studying lots of different things. Maybe I don't want to study math and 2 different kinds of sciences. That's okay. That means that you're a great student in person. A place like UChicago with a core curriculum could be a great college, but the 2 might not be a good fit. What you have to know is what you like, what you think you're good at, what you may want to study in college, and what you don't. And then you can look at liberal arts colleges and figure out what their general curriculum is all about. I worked in admissions at Kenyon, which has a general distribution requirement. They have 5 areas of distribution versus our 8 at UChicago in the core. And I read applications entirely differently, right? Liberal arts colleges don't typically read applications by major. So I don't admit to a specific major or a program. I'm just one undergraduate college, and I'm not making my choice. I'm not advocating for admission based on what you want to study. If it looks like the things you claim you want to study, you're prepared for, then that's fine. We also know that many students will change their minds once they get to college. So unlike some schools that have very specific undergraduate colleges or programs, we're not admitting by major. But to be sure, for 2 different colleges that have 2 different curriculum requirements, I would read an application very differently. So if a student really struggles in STEM, they are hoping to never take math and science again, they are done, they don't want to think about calculus, well, you could end up at a college that does not have a math and science requirement. They may have a general quantitative requirement that often includes social sciences. There's a lot of cool research that happens in the social sciences. Generally, the math you need to know is statistics-based, not calculus-based, and that would still count for a lot of schools' quantitative requirements. So if you are that person, you may be looking for a college that does not have a strict lab science or math requirement. If I read an application like that from applying to UChicago, where a student's like, oh, I'm hoping to never study STEM again, I hate math, I don't like these things, I would be concerned, because I know coming down the line, they will have to study 2 different kinds of sciences as well as math at UChicago. And that is regardless of what they want to major in and do in the future. So students, as you think about, maybe going to a liberal arts college, well, you'll get the chance to take a lot of different subjects and classes. You do want to think a little bit about the degree to which you want to do that. It'll vary for every college. So last piece, we're just going to play, this is the last slide, we're going to play a quick matching game. These are all UChicago affiliates. They taught here, they went here, they work here. They're all UChicago affiliated in some way. I want you to take a moment and not use your phones or your computers, just use your brains. I'm going to tell you 4 different majors, right? 4 different things that these people studied. You're going to match the major to the UChicago affiliate person. And then I'll give you a moment just to think, maybe scribble it down, and then we'll go through those. So these 5 people studied 4 different majors. 2 of the people on this slide studied the same major. So one person majored in mathematics at a liberal arts college. One person majored in economics. 2 people majored in international studies, and 1 in political science. So I'm going to say those again: math, economics, international studies, and political science. Take a moment. You may discuss at home. You may use collective brains and community to find your answers, but don't use your phones or your computers. Don't Google anything. So take a moment. I want you to match the UChicago affiliate liberal arts person with either their math, econ, international studies, or poli-sci major. So let's take a moment just to do that. Normally I bring things with me. I'm sorry, there's like no prize here. All right, just one more moment. Who studied mathematics, who studied economics, who studied international studies, and who studied political science? One of those majors is going to be used twice. 2 people here are very similar and studied the same thing. All right, so if you want to use the chat function, you can. Good luck with that. So I'm going to go down the line here and pick a couple. So let's go with Nate Silver first. What do you think Nate Silver majored in? So he's a UChicago grad, known for his work in stats. When he was a kid, he fell in love with the game of baseball. He spent much of his early career linking stats to sports. And then with that knowledge base, made the pivot to linking stats with political science and politics. I actually use one of his websites to kind of follow election results, right? They keep that kind of work up. So what do you think Nate Silver did? Was he math, econ, international studies, or political science? You can put that in the chat if you want to guess. Any guesses? So Nate was an economics major at UChicago. Economics is a social science. We are studying the social behaviors in economics. UChicago is an undergraduate liberal arts college. We don't have professional majors, although we have professional schools on campus. We have one undergraduate liberal arts college, and then on the same campus, we have a medical school, law school, business school, departments giving out, masters and PhDs. But we don't have undergraduate business and finance, right? That's something that happens at the graduate level here. Nate studied economics, which is a social science. At UChicago, it is a very quantitative social science. You have to have really good math skills to be successful in econ at UChicago. That is the case at lots of schools, but it is pronounced here just the way we think about economics. So he was not math, but he used stats and math in a lot of what he did in the economics department. And again, for his career, has applied stats to how we learn about communities, whether that's in athletics or politics. So who do you think the math major was? I'm great at math. I was a math tutor my senior year of high school. I was not the math major, I'll give you that too. Who here was the math major? So Tammy Sager, who went to Chicago, was a math major. She came from a very STEM-oriented family. Her parents are scientists and professors. Her siblings are doctors. She came into college knowing she liked math. She took calc as like 14, some ridiculous age, like 13, 14 years old, right? She was always talented in math. And if you search online, see some of the things that she says when she talks about math, she just finds math magical. She says it opens up her soul, right? So when she was in college, she was studying math. She knew she had a talent. She knew she loved it. She also would run off and secretly go to watch the improv group on campus. She was obsessed. She just thought improv was so awesome. She ended up working in different places in Chicago, different theaters, going to different shows. And as a senior, actually left the college for a while to do some work before coming back to finish her requirements and graduating. She ended up creating a whole career for herself in comedy writing. So she's written for 30 Rock and How I Met Your Mother. She's worked with people from Saturday Night Live. She's still in improv groups in New York. She does that on the side. She's had a really successful comedy writing career. You would think that is not related at all to math, but for her, it was about finding passions. She was good in math. She was good at all of the different writing she did. She talks a lot about the nature of work in a community, that you do math academically with other people and you do improv with other people. And it's about being open to the ideas around you. So this is a common occurrence in liberal arts. Your major and your profession don't always match because again, it's about skill building. Okay, 2 people were international studies majors. Who were the 2 international studies majors? So I hate to admit it, but clearly me and Barack Obama have a lot in common because we both studied international studies. I studied international studies at Kenyon. Barack Obama actually studied more in international relations. They are slightly different programs. He also did some political science. Barack was actually a transfer student. He started out at Occidental, right, small liberal arts college in Southern California, and ended up transferring up to Columbia in New York, which is also a well-known core curriculum liberal arts college. That's kind of cool. Regardless of party, it's kind of cool to say that someone was once a transfer student and became president of the United States. I used international studies quite directly in my career when I first started. I recruited internationally. So I read and recruited from parts of Asia and Europe and South America. It was great fun. And I found that I just really like students in Illinois a little bit more. So I changed and now I don't do international recruitment. This leaves Lori Lightfoot, who came out of our law school. I believe she was Michigan undergrad. She was a political science major. So it's no surprise to me that Barack Obama and Lori Lightfoot would have some crossover there in political science. Students often have professional goals. Let's say you want to go to law school. Graduate schools will tell undergrad students what they need to see. A law school will tell undergrads, we need to see reading, writing, and research. You could conveniently do that in a major like political science. You could do that in a wide variety of reading and writing and research-based majors. It doesn't have to be one area. It certainly doesn't have to be something called legal studies. Right when you prepare for medical school, many students end up being a science major at a liberal arts college while fulfilling class requirements that get them to medical school. But surprise, like you don't have to even be a science major to go to medical school if you take the right classes, right? This is all liberal arts, all kind of critical studies based. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all so much. Hopefully you have a teeny bit more understanding of liberal arts. And let me take down the slides. Next person can go. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Veronica. That was great. Okay, next up we have Nick from Parkland, who will talk to us about community colleges.
Good evening. First of all, thank you all for having me today. And I say I really appreciate the time to talk about community colleges. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So as Kim introduced me, my name is Nick Sanders. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at Parkland College, which is located in Champaign, Illinois. We're a school about a little bit over close to about a little bit over 7,000 students. And so today what I'm going to talk a little bit about is, I guess, some of the misperceptions about community college, because there's always this perception that is like 13th grade, it's a continuation of high school, only students who don't do well academically in high school go there, or students who are maybe not as keen on college, they go there as well to kind of try it out. And those are some things that are true. However, I would tell you the majority of students at community colleges are not any of those things. And so what I really want to speak to you all tonight about is finding out to try to destroy some of those myths about community college. So I have this slide here that talks about, is community college for me? I want you all to ask yourself some of these questions. Are you seeking something as an institution as an academic flexibility? And what I mean by academic flexibility is this: classes that are taught online, hybrid, or face-to-face, or other modalities. So before the pandemic, at Parkland College, almost 65% of our classes were taught online or hybrid, meaning you don't have to come to campus, meaning that you can take them from the comfort of your home, that type of thing as well. And obviously with the pandemic, we've increased that, but we've always had that flexibility. In addition to those types of flexibility as well, community colleges typically offer classes at a wide array of times. So at Parkland, once again, we start classes sometimes as early as 7 a.m. and sometimes have classes that start as late as 8 o'clock at night. So offering that flexibility for students who have to work, have some family obligations, different things like that, or even students who are just kind of trying on college and maybe want to take a class at a day to work out with other things in their life. So community college offers that work-life balance that a lot of students will need. You can get a credential really quickly. So we have certificates at our school, which essentially a certificate is basically one semester of coursework. So for example, in our CNA program, the CNA program is 6 credit hours. You get that done in one semester. So in one semester, you'll be a certified nurse assistant with all your credentials, all your tests taken, and now you can go out and be a CNA and make, typically, depending on where you live at, probably between $14 and $19 an hour, and you get that in one semester of college. Rolling admission. So we started school for the spring semester on Monday, January 11th. However, we also have classes that will start next week on February the 1st, and then also some classes start in March. So those are our 13-week and 8-week sessions. I would say the majority of community colleges in the country have those types of flexibility. So if you look at other different colleges that are presented here today, they typically start, whatever their day they start. And if you don't make the deadline to get in, that's it, that's all. However, at community colleges, we offer a lot of different flexible dates for students to come in at different parts of the semester to get academic credits that they need in order to graduate. And then the last thing is vocational opportunities. So for example, if you were interested in being an HVAC or working in HVAC or being a plumber or being a mechanic or working in horticulture or different things like that, those are classes that are not typically taught at a large public institution or a liberal arts institution or even an international school. But at the community college, we teach those things. We teach those subjects to students so that they can get the academic and career goals that they've set for themselves. And so that's one of the things that we do at community college. So as you're looking at this slide, really take some time, reflect, and think about, do any of these things that I just mentioned here on the slide kind of apply to me in some of my observations or some of my thoughts about college? If so, community college may be the best place for you to start your educational career. All right, so just really quickly, just a summary of what I'm going to talk about, just some statistics about community college, some of the resources that community colleges offer, and then also the future of community college education. So on this slide here, it showed you how many people in the millions have graduated from community college or degrees that have been awarded at community college. And you can see it continues to rise, and it also continues to rise in 2019. I didn't put it on this slide, but it rose up to 1.18 of people who have gotten degrees at community college. And we're going to continue to see that trend kind of rise. People's perceptions about community college are starting to change. Once again, it's not just a place where students who are not doing well attend. People are starting to see the value in it. People are starting to see the ability to get an academic credential quickly and get out in the workplace as well. And so as different careers start to take off and they may require less education, community colleges are going to be, we tend to think community colleges are going to be very popular with students and their families. More statistics about community college. As you can see, almost 500,000 jobs of people with associate degrees have increased. As the economy continues to improve, jobs such as HVAC, X-ray tech, medical record specialists, especially now at the era of COVID, are starting to be in high demand. One of the things that we're seeing just at the community college where I work at is like a lot of students are coming in and already having some work experience, but they need the associate's degree to get a better promotion. Some of the employers now are not necessarily requiring a bachelor's degree to work in management. They do want some college, and typically some college can be an associate's degree. And so a lot of students are coming in now and getting that. Also, another trend that we're seeing too at the community colleges is what we call our GECC, what's called the General Education Core Curriculum. And what that's for is, once again, for people who work jobs and they say, hey, we want you to have some type of college experience, we'll pay for it, but we need to see some academic rigor. You can't just come in and take a bunch of fluff courses. On that GECC, you're going to take classes that are part of the general education core curriculum. So classes in the liberal arts and sciences, classes in the physical science and life sciences, language, things like English and speech, and those types of things as well. And initially, when we set that program up, it's a statewide program, we thought it would be more non-traditional students who are over the age of 30 coming back and trying to get a degree. However, we're also seeing a large influx of younger people who are starting to do that as well. And the reason why a lot of younger people are starting to get that GECC is because it sets them up to either transfer to a four-year school or go out and get a job. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. If you go through that GECC and say, you know what, I really like learning, I really like this particular subject, maybe I'll find a four-year school, and I don't want to step on Brian's presentation after me, but I can go on and go to a four-year school, these classes will transfer, and I can build up to a bachelor's degree. Or for some students to go, you know what, this is enough. I'm going to get this associate's degree and try to go out and find a job utilizing the skill sets and classes that I've learned here in my 2 years at community college. So that's one of the great things about community college. One other thing too, I'm going to emphasize too, and I should have did at the beginning. One of the wide known things about community college is that it's inexpensive. And I hate doing that when I talk about community college, because we talk about that ad nauseum. And I think sometimes when you talk about it's more inexpensive, it kind of cheapens the product, and it doesn't. Community colleges classes have rigor. they have resources, they have facilities, they have all these different types of things that you would find at any other four-year school. And so by saying that, I think, like I said, sometimes we cheapen the experience, and I don't want to cheapen it at all. Obviously, we are more inexpensive, but the academic rigor and the whole promise of community college, which is getting students to their academic and career goals, we do just as well as some of our counterparts. Okay. And speaking of resources, so all community colleges, most of them have advising, they have tutoring, they have mental health counseling, they have help students with physical or mental disabilities who can help them with get better with their learning. One of the things that we do here at Parkland, which is kind of unique, is that we actually have a food pantry. So one of the biggest issues facing college students now is food scarcity. And we set up a actual pantry to help out some of our students. And a lot of community colleges actually in the country are starting to develop this as well, is to help students who go to community colleges secure food. And they may be in food deserts, or they may not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so we're also trying to provide those resources as well. I think any college, and all of us will attest to that too, who are on the panel tonight, we want to make sure we take care of you not only academically, but mentally and physically as well. And so community colleges are really starting to step up and take advantage of that model and live up to that model as well. Excuse me. Also, our students at community college have the opportunity to work with faculty members on projects. A lot of faculty members have doctorals, have PhDs, or doing research, and our students have the opportunity to study with them, to do different things. For example, even, like I said, I'm using Parkland, but at Parkland, we have a health professions program. It's probably our most popular major. And we have a lot of faculty members who do research on sales, who's doing research on COVID, who are doing research on a number of different things. And those faculty members have research assistants, which are our students. And those are students who are first semester freshmen, maybe even second year students. They have the opportunity to do that. So that looks really good on their resume. That also looks good for them in terms of applying to four-year schools and different opportunities like that. And then internships. So at Parkland, once again, we offer different internships. So we have an internship with Walt Disney World. We have internships with Google. We have an internship with Walmart. And these for a variety of different majors as well. We also have career services to help our students out and figure out what they want to do with their academic credentials that they're earning. And so once again, we really want to make sure that students at the community college are getting those same opportunities. And I think community colleges have really stepped up to do that. And we do it on a little bit of a smaller scale because we don't have a large amount of students typically. So you have to get that good one-on-one personal attention. The future of community colleges. A lot of community colleges offer what they call 2+2 programs, which are essentially where students would do 2 years at a community college and then transfer to another four-year school and complete their last 2 years. Most of the time, those 2+2 programs, you're guaranteed admission in those last 2 years. And a lot of community colleges are not only doing it with colleges within their state, but out of state colleges as well. So at Parkland, for our international students, we have a 2+2. So students can do 2 years at our school and then do their last 2 years at the University of Cincinnati. And they get guaranteed admission, and they also get a scholarship as well. So we have partnerships, and most community colleges have partnerships with schools, like I said, in their state or even outside of their state as well. Opportunities for you in high school to get community college credit or college credit as well. 2 years ago, we had a 15-year-old student who graduated from community college. He got 60 hours. He started school there when he was 13. He took a full course load. He's homeschooled, but 13 years old, start taking college credits at 13. He's allowed to do so. And by the time he was 15, he had graduated and had an associate's degree already. And we have those type of opportunities that you may not be able to do at different other institutions. And then also, a lot of community colleges now have housing complexes attached to them so that students can live in a residence hall. They don't just live on their own. They live whether it's close to campus, whether it's something that's school affiliated and ran, make sure we offer the proper security and different things like that. So all these things community colleges are starting to do now. And so we're really trying to change the perception of community colleges. Not to nerd out a little bit, but community colleges really came into the forefront in the 60s and 70s. It was more geared toward older adults and maybe, like I said, students who haven't done well. But that has really changed in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, where these 2+2s have come into play, offering opportunities for students in high school to get the college credit, and then the housing and the other components that I mentioned earlier in my presentation as well. So I think going forward, what I would tell people about community colleges is that community college is for the wide spectrum of our country. So for students who are as young as 16, 17 at traditional age to students who are older. At Parkland, we have a wide array of students, ages, experiences, etc., and they all come there to learn, and they all are getting their academic and career goals that they set for themselves met. And so I think in closing, I will tell you that the community college is a place that you can get those academic objectives and professional objectives met. You can do it in a very quick and efficient manner. And you could do it in a place that it enables you to either go back and, like I said, get a 4-year degree or go on and get an advanced degree, or with that 2-year degree, go out and get a job, which is essentially the whole goal of college. So without further ado, thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
Thank you so much, Nick. Okay, and last up, we have Brian Hodges from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he will speak to larger public universities.
Sorry, it's not working out the way I wanted to. Give me a second. Can you see my screen? Okay, we're good to go. So good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Hodges with the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I'm going to be talking about large public universities or institutions. And I hope you've been paying attention. There is a common theme that we've been talking about, is pretty much having a lot of options and a lot of different opportunities. And every institution, when it comes to either international or private or community college, we talk about that we have a variety of options that students can take advantage of at our institutions. And at a large public institution, usually students flock there. Obviously, our institutions are huge. Illinois is in the Big Ten Conference, and enrollment can range anywhere from like 20,000 to almost maybe about 60,000 students. There are a lot of options. People or students tend to go these routes because we have a well-known campus, or we're very branded, or pretty much all over our individual states. But each of these institutions have a variety of options. And I hope that listening to our presentation, that you're able to take advantage of all those different opportunities and options that are available to you. So to talk about large public institutions, I'm going to have a few slides, and these are typically the slides I picked out, slides you hear from all of our public institutions about what options are available. And we usually are to be honest with you, telling the same thing. My presentation is going to be branded with orange and blue, obviously, but for the most part, you're going to see that these public institutions are saying the same thing. But what you need to figure out is which institution of all our institutions is going to be the best fit for you. And does this match with what I'm trying to accomplish as far as my next steps, as far as my career I want to pursue, and what I want to do after I graduate. So when you think about large public institutions, one thing we usually tout is that we have a huge alumni base, and that is true for the most part. And it's not just to help you find jobs once you graduate from college. A lot of these institutions have opportunities on campus when it comes to internships, when it comes to research opportunities. It's a way for students to take advantage of students that have done the things that you're trying to do at that particular campus. So most of these large institutions, we'll see they'll have big alumni bases. If it's in their particular state, if it's in the big city in their particular state, or they're spaced throughout the entire US. These are opportunities that students can take advantage of currently on campus when it comes to different opportunities that are available to them, and also when that next step, once they're ready to graduate, and hopefully reaching out to that alumni base so you can actually find jobs. So again, is another way to showcase the different options and opportunities have at those particular institutions. You also see at large public institutions that they have a vast number of student organizations at their particular campus. They range usually from political to social to cultural to volunteer to sports to academic to pretty much anything that you could think of. And one thing I want you definitely to take away from this as well, if you haven't heard anything else from other institutions, you'll hear that there's an academic education that students are involved in. There's also a social education that students are usually a part of on campus as well. So you're going to get the academic part, whatever institution you go to, but that social education is just as important. Meeting with different people, talking to different students, meeting someone from a different background, hanging out with people from different cultures. It's a great for you to grow personally and eventually professionally, because you will be working with those individuals at your particular job once you graduate. So it is important that that social education is a part of it. And usually these big institutions have a variety of different options that are available to students. You also see all these big institutions have sports, and they're usually Division I sports. They're usually big name sports, even if their teams are not that great. I'm not going to talk about Illinois right now, but usually what you'll see a variety of opportunities for students to get involved in some kind of sports. Obviously, men's basketball and football are the popular sports, and usually ones on the major TV stations, but not just the Division I sports. Also, you think about club sports or even intramural sports on their particular campuses. They have a lot of options for students to stay involved and stay active, but also get involved in those different Division I sports. So it's a great way to get involved in school spirit and really learn to love your particular campus. But each institution usually has a big showcase when it comes to their sports, especially if they're a Division I sport. So shifting away from the activities is one thing that our universities usually talk about is recruiting and the number of companies that come recruit students on campus. Now, again, you'll hear a lot of our institutions tout that we have a lot of universities, a lot of companies come recruit our students. We're usually ranked US News and World Report. Some of these are good accolades, some of these maybe not so great. But again, because of the name recognition, because of the institutions that may have been around a while, they usually get a lot more companies come recruiting the students at these bigger institutions. But they do the same thing when it comes to recruiting at community colleges, recruiting at private schools, recruiting at other institutions. Every institution has companies coming to recruit their students. You just probably see more at a bigger institution, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not those options aren't available to you. Speaking about recruiting, you see some bigger names that might come to the campus. I know for University of Illinois, we usually talk about our Fortune 100 companies to come recruit our students, but these same companies also recruit at other institutions. So usually larger public institutions will showcase these big names, but again, these options are available to all students at all the different institutions. So again, I'm just going to keep reiterating this. These options and opportunities are available to all students. You just probably see it more prominent at a public or large public institution, just because the number of students that are on campus and usually the exposure that companies will see at a larger, bigger institution. Also, you'll see that that the bigger institutions will tout the experience learning aspect of it. I know majority of the students, especially on the Illinois campus, they have opportunities to take advantage of internships, of assistantships, of research that's available to them. Study abroad once we get past the pandemic, that will open up again. That's all part of experiential learning, and that's something that usually these large institutions will definitely tout. But again, these opportunities are available to around all institutions. So again, think about the different options that are available to you. Think about the opportunities that are available to you. You might see it at a larger scale at a bigger institution just because of the number of students that are on campus and the name recognition. But again, these opportunities are available everywhere that you're thinking about as far as the next step in your education. Another aspect, especially being at a large institution, you will be at a large institution as far as students are concerned. Like I said before, especially being in the Big Ten Conference, most of the institutions that are public have large class sizes as far as incoming students, incoming freshmen, incoming transfer students. They can range anywhere from about 6,000 to about 9,000 new freshmen each year. The enrollment size came anywhere between 30,000 to about 60,000. I know University of Illinois, we reached over 50,000 students about 2 years ago. That was the first time we actually reached that number. So if you think about these large institutions, you're going to see a lot of students on campus. But one thing I will talk about, I'm talking about in the next slide, just because you're at a bigger institution, don't assume that all the classes you're going to be involved in are going to be between 100 to 500 students. The classes can get pretty small once you get into your major. But again, you will be a part of a big class. And speaking of classes, when you get to these large institutions, you'll see there are a variety of different classes that are available to students. Veronica talked about majors, different programs that do require general education classes that all students have to take. About 50% of students that go into college, for the most part, change their major. And you'll need flexibility, especially if you're trying to change from one major to another, about which courses you're going to take and eventually transfer into a different program. And having a variety of different classes that are offered each year definitely makes it easier for those students to make that change. For your major, for the most part, you're going to have some core classes you can probably have to take. At maybe an institution like University of Illinois, anywhere between 40 to about 55% of your classes will probably be very specific about the course you need to take. That other percentage will be in either some general education classes or going to be in elective courses. And they're usually going to be categories full of classes that you could take a variety of different subjects in. And having the number of programs that we do offer, a number of classes that we do have, a number of students that we do have on campus, there are a lot of classes and a lot of options for students to take. So again, being at a bigger institution, being at a large public institution, you're going to see there's a variety of different options for classes that are available to students as well. One other aspect that, especially large institutions, they usually say the same thing, has to do with the campus buddies they see on campus. And University of Illinois is not, does the exact same thing. We talk about our squirrels. We have a squirrel watching club. We have a watcher of squirrel watching club. We even have squirrels that maybe have an orange hue based on the school colors. But I found out that pretty much every big institution has a bunch of squirrels running around on campus. Now, we all talk about this, we all tout it, we all put it in our publications that squirrels are great on campus and we're unique. But a lot of institutions, big institutions, have squirrels running around on campus. So when you hear this, it's going to be great and it's a funny antidote, but just know all the other Big Ten schools, all the other SEC schools, they have squirrels running around on campus too. Now, I talked about that you might have been on a bigger institution. You have a lot of students on campus. So you will have classes that are going to be pretty big, 100, 200, up to 500 students in a lecture hall. But once you get into your major, those classes get really small really fast. Once you kind of get into what you're interested in as far as your major and career, those classes will get really small. So don't think that just because you're at a big institution, every single class you're going to be in is going to be in a huge lecture hall. Those classes, usually they are big lecture hall type classes. They have discussion sections that are a little bit smaller. It can range anywhere between 10 students to about 25 students, 30 students. So you'll still have interaction with your professor. It's going to help you with those next steps and talk about research opportunities, getting in touch with alumni with different programs or different fields you're interested in. So just don't assume just because you're at a bigger institution that classes are going to all be really big classes. You also see a different type of representation that you'll see at these bigger institutions. They attract students not from just all over the US, but from a lot of international countries. So you're going to meet students that either could look like you, come from the same territory as you, but you'll see a variety of students that come from different areas, different backgrounds, different cultures. And again, that's another aspect of the social education that you'll receive. And I'm talking about this at a bigger, larger institution, even though you might not see it right up front, but when you get into your classes, when you get into your activities, you're going to see a variety of students you're going to meet with. So that social education is definitely a part of that. But you also see this at other institutions as well. Last aspect that I'll talk about will be the different programs that these bigger institutions offer. For the most part, they can range anywhere from about 100 to about 200 different programs. There's a variety of different aspects that are available to students. Some colleges might have more specific majors or programs. I know University of Illinois is known for engineering and business, but like Veronica said, we have a huge college of liberal arts and sciences. We have a fine and applied arts college, and other institutions like University of Illinois have those same options. So again, it's going to be up to you. We want to make sure you know what's available to you and what options that you do have to pick and choose where you want to go as far as your major and as far as your career is concerned. So that was my last slide. We're going to go through a Q&A now, but if you do have any questions or thoughts, especially when it comes to thinking about a bigger institution, here's my email address. Please feel free to reach out, and I am here to answer any questions you might have. So I'm going to stop sharing, and there we go.
Right. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you to all of our panelists tonight. We really hope that you learned something new. That's why we have this, so that you can learn about different options that you have. We did have quite a few questions coming in, so I want to turn it over to Jen and to take it away with the questions.
Thank you. And again, thank you to all of our panelists, and thanks to our participants, our audience members who typed in some questions. I've tried to summarize as many as we can get to, with having respect for the time that we asked for our panelists to be available. And so I'm going to ask the question, and really the question will be for all of the panelists, essentially, to try to answer as succinctly as possible for your institution, as best as you can. And I know there were some questions that came in. I tried to type responses where I could. Our panelists are not going to be able to answer specific questions about their institutions, although they are wonderful and great. That's not why they're here tonight. And so we want to respect that and keep our questions to general institution type questions. So with that, I'll begin with what type of student would you say would be successful at your type of institution? Not only from you're looking for this type of student and you would admit them, but who would be successful at your type of institution? We could start with Jim.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned at the top of my presentation that it's kind of intuitive. You need to be a little more independent, because you're not going to be able to come home for homecoming or for, friends' birthdays or your birthday. So that's a bit of a difficult part of going somewhere abroad, especially because it can be very far away. You can go abroad and go to Canada, and it's a 5-hour drive, but you can go abroad to the other side of the world and can be quite far away. And then the other part of being independent is also that in a lot of cases, in a lot of countries, you don't get the same kind of support system in some ways that US schools will offer. Not that there's not supports, because there's still writing centers and counseling centers and opportunities for help and all that, but it's much more of an expectation in a lot of other countries that students will be coming to school, that they'll be adults and capable of taking care of themselves, and that they'll reach out if they have questions, not that someone's going to always be there with the resources and things waiting for you. So you do need a bit more of a student that can reach out and ask for help when they need it.
Thank you, Jim. Veronica, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think for us, that first hurdle would be thinking about the core. So if you're looking at a liberal arts college that has a pretty extensive core set of gen ed requirements, we are thinking about your ability to be successful across the core. We don't admit by major or by program, but we know that about 1/3 of your education is going to be those gen ed requirements. So we do think about students' ability to do the core and how much they would enjoy, not just get through every part of the core, but really enjoy learning as a full core curriculum liberal arts student. So I would say that is probably number one. And then number two, your average liberal arts student is a very creative thinker, right? They pull in so much knowledge to answer questions. We try and get at the root of creativity in our essay questions. They're known for being a little bit more creative, but make sure that if those liberal arts colleges you're applying to ask certain types of questions, you get at the heart of what they're searching for, right? Are they thinking about creativity and posing creative questions? Are they trying to get at the heart of another value? Like, try and look at them as value-based statements And then it'll help you, number one, answer the questions, but number two, decide if you share the values of that institution.
Thanks, Veronica. Nick?
I think community college is for any student, to be quite honest. It's for the student that Jim described. It's for the student that Veronica described. I can't read Brian's mind, but if whatever he describes, I think mostly it's for students who really know that there's two things. They really know this is what I want to do, and this is just a gateway to get me to my next level of my education. Or students who say, you know what, I want to get this education to get on the job market. So they're really focused right away. But like I said, there are all these other things that the panelists have described tonight as well.
Thanks, Nick. And Brian?
I'll say, especially at Illinois, since it's such a big institution, asking questions or being inquisitive early on, because we give a lot of information early, especially like during that first week of classes. It's the welcome week, and we give a lot of information and then we let them go. So asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions is a very important skill that, a lot of people don't have. Grown-ups don't have that skill to ask questions. So I would hopefully have students not be afraid and then kind of grow into their independence. And they don't necessarily not need to have that right off the bat, but they need to be asking questions early and often, so they know exactly where they go and what they need to be successful.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Our next question, could each of you speak to some participants are wondering about how a gap year would be viewed, whether or not that could be a positive or not. And I know, I have a feeling I know what you're all going to say, but if you could each just touch on it slightly, I think that would help. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'll jump off. So yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, we'll all probably say that it's fine and it'll work in some way. For international universities, generally, yeah, it'll work, and it's very common abroad to do gap years. So maybe a lot of international schools will be more used to it than many US schools. And then there's also opportunities where there are gap year partners that can do some kind of structured internship or experience, or, some kind of opportunity abroad that has partners with international universities. Like there's a company in Ireland that does structured gap years for students to live in Ireland, and then they help you apply into Irish universities. So there's opportunities like that as well. So yeah, it'll be fine, and then you'll just use whatever your academics were coming out of high school to apply on the kind of the same timeline as if you were, the gap year wasn't there.
Thanks, Jim. We'll just go in the same order. Veronica?
Yep, we have students every year who request gap years for all very different reasons. I would encourage students, if you're looking at a selective liberal arts college, if you know ahead of time that you want to do a gap year, to really still, if it fits, apply to college in the normal senior year of your high school year, because you still have the support of the teachers and counselors and people at your school. And then you could take that gap year once you've secured admission to a great college you want to go to. I would advise against doing the reverse and just waiting until you're away from school to do that. It is much harder.
Our students take gap years, whether for a variety of different reasons. So community college students they take gaps in their education all the time, and it's not frowned upon or anything like that. It's very, very minimal, no big deal.
I actually agree with Veronica. I would say definitely apply, get admitted, and then have that conversation. Some universities will be different when it comes to that. Some frown upon it, some are okay with it. Some will say, well, you can take a gap year, don't take any college classes. If you're in a project or doing something as far as work related or internship, fantastic. If you're doing a gap year and you're not doing anything, that could be a problem for some institutions. So definitely the universities you're interested in, make sure you talk to them and find out what their policy will be like, because every institution will be different when it comes to that. I wish there was a blanket statement that everybody it'll make it easier for you, of course. But yeah, make sure you're talking to those institutions and find out what their gap policy is like. But I would definitely err on applying, being admitted, and then have that conversation.
Great, thanks everybody. Given the last year where testing has become a little bit more difficult for some students, Do you feel like testing, standardized testing, is becoming less of a factor at your type of institution? And obviously, we know this year is unique. So maybe you could speak to either this year and then even beyond, where testing and standardized testing falls in terms of the type of institution. If you could touch on that.
Ooh, yeah, it's been a crazy year for international schools. I mean, like I said, a lot of international schools only look at academics, so it's been a huge change. And it's hard to say whether it's going to stick. So a lot of schools internationally are taking just just your transcripts, your high school transcripts for consideration, and they'll exempt you from ACT or SAT or APs. Some still require some AP scores or what used to be SAT 2 scores, but probably not as much anymore. But it's going to vary a lot from school to school. And then I don't know that it'll be something that'll continue, like it'll always be like that, or if it's just like a 1-year exemption and it'll go back to the way it was once, people are taking the SAT or ACT more. So you'll see a lot more test flexible, maybe not test optional, test flexible kind of options abroad. But it's very different at every university.
Sure. So UChicago has been test optional for a few years now, so it was not an adjustment for us in the process. We're not done with this year, but we've certainly seen more students applying without testing, which makes sense because in some of our bigger urban districts, students have just not had access to a test. Yes, they could have been registering all year long and not had an opportunity, which is fine. Schools have made decisions to go test optional, whether it's for a year, 2 to 3 years, permanently, temporarily. It's a lot right now to keep track of. There is a website, if you go to fairtest.org, it does link you to all of the schools that are test optional, and you can read on different college pages whether that is just for now, for several years, permanently. Know that when a school says they're test optional or test blind, that they don't want test scores at all, that they mean it. So if it feels unsafe to be pursuing tests later, it's okay to not do it. That school is going to lean on other things in your application. If you feel later on you could safely do so, then yes, you can prep and do so as normal. But just know that when schools say they're test optional, they really do mean it. If I have a file that doesn't have testing, it just doesn't get assessed. It's just not part of the application, and that student is not held and not at a disadvantage for not having testing. No questions asked.
Well, for the community college, obviously we don't use SAT or ACT test scores for admission. We do use it for placement into college courses. If students do not provide test scores, they can then take an assessment test to see if they can get placed into classes. And then also too, we do use previous college experience as well. So if you've taken a college class at another institution, you provide an official transcript, we can provide placement, or it can meet the prerequisite for courses that you need. So in terms for community colleges, we've been test optional since the beginning, so to speak. So I don't have some of the woes some of my other colleagues have right now.
This is our first year going test optional, and it was a blast, to be honest with you. I mean, it took some time to roll out the process, but I don't see how, this is my opinion, but I don't see how we can put that cookie back in the jar. It's going to be up to the university administration to kind of make that decision. This was a 1-year thing that we're doing now. They're in talks of what's going to look like for next year. But we're showing that, and most institutions like me are showing that we can do reviews without test scores. Now, for our institution, to be honest with you, some of the more competitive programs, engineering, business, some of the sciences, we've seen a higher percentage of our students submit test scores. Some of the ones that are maybe not as competitive, we've seen that number go lower. So I can see us continuing test optional, but again, the decision has not been made going forward. And I'm pretty sure most institutions like Illinois are probably in the same boat trying to figure that out for the next cycle.
Great, thank you. Next question, it has to do with athletic scholarships. And obviously the types of programs available are going to depend, but I do think it might be interesting at least to hear that whether or not US citizens are athletic scholarships available to US citizens at your types of institutions?
Yeah, not really. So if you're a great student and you're a leader, you can apply for some leadership awards that might give you like €500 or something. So like a nice, congratulatory note and a check for, some trips or spending money, but it's not going to be like you'll see at US universities. You can still play and compete, and you can travel around and go compete in international cycling competitions in Belgium or something, but you're not going to get paid. It's definitely a student activity kind of thing. So it's a bit different than here, but still fun.
Liberal arts colleges, you'll find them along different lines of athletic divisions, and that's really what's going to matter more. You can find a liberal arts college that is like Division I, giving out, their liberal arts sciences colleges will have scholarships. You will have standalone liberal arts colleges that are not and cannot give out. UChicago is Division III when it comes to athletics. So by rule, we cannot give scholarships for athletic talent, although we do have athletes who happen to get academic scholarships and other types of awards, but it is not specifically for their athletic abilities at Division III level.
At community colleges, we offer full athletic scholarships or partial athletic scholarships. We also mix in a little bit of academics as well with that. So yes, we do offer scholarships to students, and that's entirely up to the coaches who they decide to give scholarships to.
Yeah, same here. We really have nothing to do when it comes to athletic scholarships. Usually when we get those questions, we share them right to our Division of Intercollegiate Athletics.
Okay, great. Thanks. I know we're getting close to our time. And so I do want to, again, thank our panelists. The last question that I'll ask for the night, I'd say, and it's hard because I know we haven't been able to get to every specific question, but I think we've covered this, a good majority of the types of questions that have been asked. But do you guys, from your institution's perspective, have anything to say in terms of, there's a lot of juniors on this evening, in terms of the pandemic and the class going forward or admissions for next year? Do you think that there's going to be any nuance or impact that you're seeing a difference, or that you expect to see for juniors this year based on the life that they've had for the last year? I know that's a huge question and we could have a long talk about that, but just if you could touch on that, I think that some families would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll kick it off. I mean, I think I liked Brian's comment earlier about it having students that ask questions. I think that applies to this situation in particularly. It's always been true. It's better to ask questions earlier rather than later. So ask your questions now, not next year when you're ready to apply, so that you're ready to apply by the time it gets there, and use the great resources you have, your counselors that are here on the call and in your school. Because it might change a lot. I mean, I think a lot of schools are being a lot more flexible, but that's going to change a lot next year, and it's a very fluid situation. So, I'm sure every time you've asked a question, you've been getting answers like, yeah, we think so, but we don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll let you know. But you still definitely got to ask those questions and try and figure out some of those answers and do it earlier rather than later, and start using this time you have now before the crush of application deadlines is on you to get some answers and start figuring some things out.
I think we got over, well, not over, but we have dealt with the big hurdle of testing this year for this current class that's going to have ramifications for future classes. There is, for students who want to discuss the pandemic, the common application, the coalition application, right? Lots of applications now have built-in space to talk about disruption to your life because of it. It's a whole new section. So you don't have to take up space in another essay that you want to write about something else. There's a special section now in many applications, not all, but in many, where you can write about the pandemic. I think just if that section stays and you use it next year, use it wisely. I want you to think about the range of applications that your admissions counselors are reading. So, I've been telling students that if your life is like mine, like minorly inconvenienced, you probably don't need to use that section, because I know that activities have been canceled and trips have been canceled and you're going crazy at home. Like, I know that I'm living your same life, so I know what's going on. If you are happy and healthy, there's probably little need to use that section. If there has been significant impact to your well-being, your family, a community that you're a part of because of the pandemic, like if you have something to say about the nature of health and equity in life this year, then you should feel free to use that section. And you should also know it's a section you don't have to use if it's just been inconvenient. For me, I wouldn't use it, right? For me, it was inconvenient. But I have family members and friends who I know would have things to say about life in 2020 and 2021, and I would want them to feel good about using that section. So if that stays, just know that you'll be given space to talk about what life has been like in different ways this year and last year.
I don't think it's going to affect too many things for a community college. However, if I can offer some advice, it's two things. A is to really think about what you want in your college experience and take a new mindset to do it. Because whether we like it or not, it has changed our country, has changed our world. And you really need to think about what are your academic, social, and career goals, and really take a critical look at these institutions to see if they can get you there. So that's the one thing I would tell you. And then the second thing I would tell juniors is to be patient. And just a little inside knowledge. We have meetings daily, and one day we're going left, the other day we're going right, the other day we're going forward, the other day we're going back. The colleges and institutions really don't know at this point about certain things and how they're going to get back to pre-pandemic. So I would tell you to be patient and really take a critical look at these institutions and think about, can they get you to these goals that you have set for yourself or you set for your child?
Yeah, there's not much I can add there. I'm going to steal a quote from Veronica's slide. We're going to continue to be adaptable and flexible when it comes to whatever changes that come. But again, stress what Nick said, be patient with us. I know we're going to do similar things when it comes to a COVID space on our website. So again, like mentioning what Veronica said, if it's going to be your mildly inconvenience, be sparingly with when you use that session. But if you had some serious issues that came up, we won't give you a space to explain. But for the most part, we're all going to pretty much do the same thing. We're going to try to adapt and be flexible to make sure we're available and doing things we need to do. So we're giving the students the best options they have.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists for being with us tonight and taking the time to be with our families. We really appreciate you guys representing your institutions, but moreover, the general greater type of institution that you represent. We really appreciate it. I know our families have gotten a lot of good information. And for our families, know that our websites, both Deerfield and Highland Park High School, the post-secondary counseling websites on each have a lot of information. Binder type information, electronic binders and things like that, where you can learn a little bit more about international colleges or large publics and things like that. So definitely go to our websites and see what else you can do from a reading perspective. But again, thank you all for being with us tonight, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for Deerfield and Highland for having us tonight too. Thank you for you all putting this on and educating your students and your families. It's a great program.
Thank you, Nick.
Nick.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Be warm, be safe.